what we're going to do, we're going to start with a presentation that introduces the concepts of projects, and then we will go into Formpak and sort of see how it works in practice. So just to highlight about projects, a project in Formpak is like an umbrella, and what it does is it summarizes the mission. So for example, the mission in the example on the screen is that the customer's extending their range and want our ideas. So that's the mission of the project, and then tasks within the project relate to the different jobs that are required in order for the mission to be fulfilled. So in this kind of a project, we might have 3 tasks. One might be to design new products, which could be to develop new raw materials or formulations. We may then have a second task to test those products to make sure they meet the requirements. Maybe there's some physical tests or other parameters that need to be established. And then a third task might be to send samples to the customer in order that they can review them and hopefully approve them. So that's an example of a project and some tasks that might be in it. Now, projects are very flexible, so they can be used for lots of different processes, and we need to have that in Formpak because of the variety of companies that are using Formpak, and it gives you lots of options as to how you can set up your flows. So another example might be stability testing project, where you need to do some making of samples, so you know what things you're going to put on test, then undertake those tests in specified conditions and record the results. And then you might have a third task, which is to overall determine the results, because if you've got lots of different criteria, it may be a human judgment to say, does it overall pass or not? And then you might need to add that overall status as well to some items. So the flexibility of projects to have these different flows are configured using project templates, task types, and project properties, and this can represent lots of different processes. The hardest part of projects is actually defining your processes, and even if you've got a well-defined process, and particularly with product development, the process doesn't always deliver on the expectation of what you thought, and you might need to change it, and you can also do that. So we're going to explore that in Formpak shortly. Projects can interact with external systems. So for example, you could receive a project from an ERP system in Formpak, and then work on the development within Formpak and return a project answer to an ERP system. So that's a reasonably common flow. What we're going to do next is work through a standard project with 3 tasks. So we're going to search the existing product library to find suitable products, and then develop some new products, and then send samples to the customer. And what we're going to do is we're going to work through the flow very quickly, and then look at the templates and how that flow was put together, and then go through another version of the same flow, but then go through it more slowly. So we're going to look at it from a couple of different perspectives. Okay, so here's Formpak, and I think you can probably see a familiar screen, hopefully in front of you. And where we'll start is to add a new project, and because it's the first one in the list, I haven't even bothered searching for it, so I'm just going to click add a new project. I'll just pop that over there a bit, and I'm going to use that standard project template. And you can see on this system here there's lots of different versions of projects and codes for projects, but standard project template is what we're going to use, and each business has the project templates that they need, so which you obviously user defined. We're going to just take the next code along. We're going to choose a customer for who this project will be made available. So we're going to look at the big customer in the UK and give it a date of the end of the month and save. So what this has done is now sort of allocated the initial part of the project details, and we can give it a name here. Typically you would choose a name that means something to you and your business, so you can differentiate when you're looking at lots of projects together. I'm not going to fill in every single thing that's possible because I'm trying to do this sort of fairly quickly, so we can kind of then go on to see the flow, and then we'll examine it again. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say, okay, the customer is going to want 30 grams of a sample of the product that we're going to make. And I can put all sorts of other information in, but I'm going to be really brief, and I'm just going to say, okay, the selling price is going to be 30 to 40. The cost price is going to be 10 to 15. And the presentation is not required. And I could put notes here. That would typically be like a description about what the project requires. And then how it works, because we've got this template in the background, whenever you add this kind of project template, it knows that these are the tasks that are expected to be done. So I'm just going to go straight in and start allocating this work to people so that we can again get to the end of the task fairly quickly. It's going to be all me, so again, for speed, I can do that. And I'll do the same here. And then save the project. And like I said, what I'm doing, I'm just going to look in each one and just answer it in order that we can get to the end, like I said, quite rapidly. So ordinarily, the product development task, obviously I do product development, but I'm just going to go in and pick an item. And say that I've finished. And then with the other one, I'm going to do something a bit similar. So I'm also going to say that I finished this. So now we've sort of added a project, finished 2 of the tasks. If we then go here, we can see that those are the 2 tasks that I just whooshed through. We can now go on to the sample task and say which samples we want to go to the customer. I'm going to switch this over to me. And I'm going to grab those 2 items from those other tasks. Say which sample requirements are going to go with them. Then save it, which means it's now ready to go into the lab and have the samples made and sent out. And as that happens, obviously there's lots of other things that might be happening in between, but when those samples have gone out, the lab would go in and finish their project. So they might be saying, okay, it's at the end status, and the delivery method was standard post, and I sent these today. And because I've clicked it in once, it asks me if I want to do that for the others. So I say yes, and I've done. And if I go back to the project and refresh it, I can see now that all of those tasks are complete. So to finish the project, because again, because of the flexibility of projects, it could be, although these 3 tasks are complete, you might want to add another one. So just because all tasks of a project are complete, there's not a direct relationship to the project being complete. So I can go into manage and then say it is complete. So that is a project beginning to end in minutes, which I know is not how it works, but just again to sort of show you how that works as a flow. So now let me show you the project template, because obviously we added that project and there was lots of stuff that appeared, and it's due to the project template that happened. So if I view a project template, I'm going to open in a new tab, and if I look at that standard project, you can see these are some attributes that have been set against this style of project. So you can see, for example, that it's saying, okay, we want the primary party and the contact name and the primary party category. We want the delivery party and the category and the address, but not the delivery party contact name, because it says no here. So if you then look at the project, that's exactly what we've got. So we have the primary party. This would be their address. They don't have one. And a contact name for them would go here. And then we've got the delivery party and the address space, but we haven't got a second contact name. So that's because of the way this project template has been set up. We've also got project properties, and these are completely configurable by the user. You can add as many of them as you need to reflect whatever concept you need to reflect, and you can also make them required or not. So if it's required, you must give an answer. If it's not required, so required no, then it's a suggestion. It's a, give this information if you have it. But here is, you must give this information here. So and the difference when you're looking at a project is when you're adding a project or modifying it, some will be grayed out, which means you can't remove them, and others are kind of in a darker font, which means you can take them away. And I'll show you that when we go through a project more slowly. Additionally, you can say whether you're allowed to have attachments or not. And so attachments are documents that have come from outside of Formpak that you just want to include as part of your project. So it could be a PDF report of a really long email that a customer has sent to you, or an image that they have sent to represent a concept that they want you to consider. So if you're allowed to add attachments, you'd click yes there, and then you're allowed to add attachments to the project. Then we've got the task types. So we've got these 3 task types. This is the order that they're presented in, because this is the sequence. And the sample task has a dependency, which is these other tasks have to have been worked on in order for you to think about samples. So there's a strategy, if you like, for the order in which things should be done. And obviously, life's not always plain sailing. So all of this is suggestions, because sometimes things need to be a bit different, and I'll show you how you can manage that kind of thing. Then on the product development task, if I just show you that, because this is configurable also, I'm just going to view that task type. And so this is a product development task, and it gives information about, do you want to include certain buttons or options in this style of a task, and then what else would you like to do and how do you want it to behave. So a lot of flexibility in the terms of behavior and flow and information that's allowed to be added or must be added in terms of both the tasks themselves and the projects, and it's all in the template and the task types. Okay, so what we'll do now is we're going to add a project more slowly and follow a more usual flow from like a business perspective. So for this, if you imagine, so in a lot of businesses, the sales account manager might go out to the customer or speak to them and gather requirements about what the customer needs, and then add those onto a system so that the internal development team can work on it. So if we work from that perspective, so as an account manager, I've been to see the customer, I'm going to add a new project. I shall use the same project flow that we used before and happily allocate just the next code along. You can set up your own project code sequences. So if you had different divisions and you wanted them to have independent sequences for their project codes, you could. If you had different styles of projects, so maybe you were using projects for customer complaints, but I'm sure that you don't have any. But if you were, you could have maybe a different code sequence for that style of project compared to a request for new product development, that kind of thing. So the primary customer. So the reason there's more than one customer is because often there is. So typically the primary customer, the primary party, would be the brand for which the product is being developed. And then if you're sending samples to somebody else, because maybe they have a contract manufacturer, that would then be the delivery party. And I'll go into this in a bit more detail in a moment. So I'm going to do a flavour style project here. So it's like the flavour drinks company. And I'll do it for the end of the month. Just notice as well here, there's a copy button. So if you have if you're adding a project and it's very similar to another project, you can use copy so you don't have to enter all the information again. So now we've got our main customer, but maybe we want to add some additional details. So this one, we're going to have this as a natural lemon squash flavour is what we're going to need. And because I'm working from the perspective of being the account manager, I probably don't know the answer to everything that might be needed internally. So I'm going to, again, work on that sort of perspective. And maybe I put in some cost information. Let's actually put in a delivery party as well here. So there's a delivery party of, the easygoing customer. And the customer has said they want 30 grams of the flavours that we offer. And in my sample notes, so I've got different areas I can put notes. I'm going to put in here that good for squash. And often in here, this note transfers to the sample task. So people use it in slightly different ways, but anything that you want to see on the sample task is a good idea to put here. So this isn't especially relevant to that, just sort of like showing you how it transfers over. And then you can see now here we've got selling price, which is black. So if I wanted to, I could minus that away, but I kind of still want to use that, so I'm going to keep that there. But I can take away the presentation required. So I'm going to minus, and now it's gone. So I've avoided having to answer that question. One of the benefits of that very quick removal is you can give people suggestions about the kind of things that you want them to think about. And if it's not essential, they add that information, they can easily take it away. So it gives you a neat way of making suggestions without enforcement. So here I'll put a cost, I'm going to say 30 to, no, hang on, let's go higher, 70 to 90. And let's go to 45. And then on notes, so this would then genuinely be notes about what the customer expectation is, can be copied and pasted from something if you already have it electronically, but maybe you'd just be typing it in depending on what you needed. So I'm going to say lemon squash for label supermarket. They must be natural. From an account manager point of view, this is possibly all I know or all I'm communicating. I probably know more, but this is what I'm saying. So from this point, I would press save. Now then, obviously, there's the internal group who might be getting dozens of projects a day, hundreds in a week, that kind of thing. How are you then knowing that these things are arriving, and how do you look at them? So this is then when, from an internal team point of view, to monitor, you would do search for projects. And you can select different search types. There's custom searches, which if we've got time, I'll show you at the end. But a typical search, if you're trying to monitor the new projects coming in, would be to say, look at all new projects and search. And so you can see we have this project here. So it's one of the new ones. So I will view it and I can see what's going on. Obviously from the project we've just added, but what I can also do, if I wanted to maybe have a projects meeting and look at all of the new projects together, it could be that I print the projects list. And so from print, you can then say, for these projects, what information do you want to see? If it's about new ones, the data that's on the screen is probably sufficient because it just gives you the summary of what's been asked for. But because you can use this to search for historical projects of a certain type and things like that, there's a lot of options to, how you want to present the information. So if we've taken the project and now we need to review it and see, is all the data there? Is it feasible to do? And we probably would be thinking about assigning a project manager. So the project manager can monitor the project and make sure it goes through the system and the process in order that its mission is fulfilled. And you don't have to have project managers, but once you assign a project manager, only that user is allowed to modify the project and move the tasks through and sort of like push the tasks on through. So if that's something that you require, then project manager is the right way to go. You would always have one user that could have super access in order that if a project manager was unexpectedly away, they could go in and still monitor and change maybe the project manager and reassign it. So if I click manage, so I'm going to assign myself as a project manager. And then as I'm reviewing it, I'm looking at these details, and obviously they've said it's got to be good for squash. There's no percentage, so I might go back to the account manager and say what percentage should they want this to be used in squash, because suitability is often dosage dependent. So I try and find that information out, and obviously because they haven't asked for a sample in squash, but I still need to know at what dosage are they going to want to use it. And what I'm also going to do is say, well, because it's got to be natural and it's also got to work for squash. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in the squash here, squash and cordials and squash, and I'm going to say it's 1%. And this will now interact with suitability checking, which is basically compliance for the customer and the product and all of that kind of thing. But I've also got this other thing here that it must be natural. Now, obviously, in some circumstances, lots of checks that a customer requires are the same all of the time because it's just a general requirement. But if they've got a project where they also want something else, you can use this concept of other parties. So at the moment, if we were to do a check on any formulations for this project, it would check the application and dosage that I've just added and these parties, but there's not going to do any kind of natural check. So I'm going to add in something that makes that happen. So basically I'm triaging the project to make it really work for the business beyond the information that maybe an account manager would know. So I'm adding that in there. So I've just added in a bit more information to make the project work better and ensure that compliance happens sort of during the development and everything else. So what I'm also going to do, because you can save and come out and pick the project back up another time. It all depends on how you work internally as a business. But for today, I'm going to go to the tasks again. So obviously these are the tasks that are part of the project template. And I'm going to assign the product selection task. So I'm going to go edit and assign this to me. And then I'm going to go into the product development task and assign that to somebody else in the team, because this would be quite more typical, obviously that different people do different things. If it's the same person doing everything, you probably don't need projects. So now we've got 3 different users doing 3 different things on the project. So that's kind of quite typical. Now, if you notice, I added users to each of these tasks, but this task was already assigned to Richard. Now, in the task itself, the task type itself, if the same user is always going to have that kind of task because there's only one person that does it, or there's a representative of a department to whom all requests go to, you can add that into the task type so you don't have to then pick who it goes to. So now we're in good shape to sort of get some work done. And if you remember, I explained that as life doesn't always run in the way that you want it to. Maybe this is a really big project and you want to have more than one person doing product development on it. What you can do is you can add another task, for example. So we can say we want to have another development project and we're going to assign that to Sarah. And now we've just created another type of task for somebody else. What I'm going to do, because I don't want to actually follow quite that flow, I can change the order of it as well, but what I'm going to do, I'm just going to delete that. And if we go into a project like this and actually we don't need to do any product development, we could delete the product development task and just leave 2 tasks. So the task, the project template is to express what you expect to happen, but sometimes things are different, and so there's flexibility to sort of change it. Okay, so I'm going to save the project at this stage because basically I've reviewed it, done some triage, set some people to work, and so I can now save. So if we go back to viewing this project, obviously these now are ready. So because this status has changed to ready, any user with a task that's ready can search very easily. So if we go search for tasks, I can say I want to find my ready tasks. So we can see that the task here for the natural lemon squash is waiting for me to do something with it, along with lots of other stuff. And so from here, I can view that task. I can also view the project, and I can basically see what my requirements are. So what I'm going to do, and if you can see, this is a product selection task. So I would go into other areas of the system, find products that I think are good for this, and then I would respond with what those are. To save time, I'm going to just do that because there's a bit more of a different process I'd like to show you. So I'm going to go in and say that the formulation I'm really keen on is this lemon formulation here. And you can see here I've got this submission reason, which is in black, which means I could remove it, but I'm going to add in a little comment. Very creative with these comments. If I wanted to, I could also add another comment. So I've just put in a couple of letters in order that you can see the style of properties that have been added on this system. So these are all project and task properties. They're not to do with items, they're to do with projects. So I won't do that. So from here, if I'm complete, because it could be that I'm adding a formulation today that I think is great from the library, and I'm waiting for some more samples, and I might add some more tomorrow. So just because I've added something, it doesn't mean I'm finished. But when I am finished, I can say that I have. So this is like an indicator to other people as well. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to log in as Cheryl so we can do that other task that's allocated to Cheryl. So now if you can see this is Cheryl's name up here. So I can do that search for tasks. But if I say now my ready tasks, see Cheryl's got a different list to me because she's a different user. And again, I can view that task, see what it's asking me to do. And I didn't put much of an instruction in here for product development, but I probably would do in a real situation. I might say, this formulation is really nice. Can you modify it for regulations or modify it for cost or impact or that kind of thing? So this is a product development task, which is different to the evaluation one. So we have some different options. And one of the options is to add a formulation. So I'm going to click that button. And what you can see is the application scenario here has pulled through from the project to say, okay, we're making a formulation and it's going to need to be okay for cordials and squash at 1%. And it's also got to meet the requirements of these different customers and party groups. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use that previous formulation as a starting point. And maybe I'll call it lemon lime formulation just to and I can allocate it a number that is a new number, or I can enter manually what number I want it to be. And if I press save, so now this is the very simple formulation that we've already selected on the other task. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to force it to do something to show hopefully a failure. So we've got here, we've just added in, we'll replace the propylene glycol with ethanol. What I'm going to do other menus and check suitability. Again, it pulls all those through, and if I check, tells me it's not suitable. If I look at the details, it tells me why. So there's 5 pages, so I'm sort of going to scroll to find out why. So here, as soon as you see something red, you know you've got a problem. The requirement is that if you're doing cordials and squash or energy drinks, there's a limit on the amount of ethyl alcohol that you're allowed. It's based on the amount that would be in the application. So this is at 1% in squash, you're only allowed 0.0049% of ethyl alcohol. And we've got 0.17, which is too much, and that's why it's failed. So now I know if I go back to propylene glycol, I know it will pass. And I'm just going to close it, and I'm going to show you something else as well. So if I attempt save and check in, there are criteria that you can set in Formpak. So per user, they are allowed or not, or they're enforced or not to make a suitability check as they're trying to save a formulation. And if it fails, they're given a message, and if they're allowed to, which is another permission, they're allowed to override that message. So here we're saying it's not suitable. Because they have permission, they're still allowed to continue, but you can set or not what these permissions are. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to change back to the propylene glycol. And I'm going to add in a bit of lime because I was making it lemon and lime and it feels wrong not to have any lime in there. I'm going to take down that. And I will save and check in. And as long as it passes, it will sail straight through without giving you a message. Okay, so there we go. So on that task, I'm just going to close some of these windows down. On this task, we can now see that this was an item. This was a formulation that was added. So because we use the button add formulation, we've made a link to the task to say, okay, these are the experiments that I've added. So if you're working on something and you might be saying experiment 1, experiment 2, experiment 3, experiment 4, when you are at a stage where you're able to choose which is the right experiment to promote as your answer, you can come to the items that you've added and you can action the task, look at those items, find the one or more than one that you want to respond with. Say you're going to add it to the response, and there it is. And if this is the only one you're doing, you would obviously say that you're now finished. And so now we have on the projects, in fact I can do it from here. You can see we have now 2 tasks that have been completed, and so it's just a sample 1 to go. Now, as the project manager, so I'm going to log back out and in as myself, because only me as the project manager can change these tasks. Continue to. So again, I can look at tasks. I can look at projects that have been added. So I'm going to look at outstanding projects added by me. There's that lemon here, and I'm gonna, I can view it or I can manage it. It's actually, you can do either at this stage, but I can obviously see that these tasks are done and this is the one that's next. So I'm going to modify this task in order to push it through to the lab, to Richard. And I shall do add from task. So this is collecting the new product development and the sample, the product from the library. Add them here. Select them and click apply to selected. So in here we have what the customer requires. This is the sample quantity required and the applications required. So when I click apply to selected, anything there goes across. If you hover, we can see that. But also it applies this here. So it kind of gives this trail of this is the focus application. Now, if you click individually, you can actually change them individually. So this apply to the selected is a shortcut so that if you have the same applications and dosages for all of the samples in a big list, you can just add them once and they're all there. But if you do need to, you can go in individually and change, for example, the dosage. If you were to change the dosage of the focus application here, you can also have enforced suitability checks at this stage, or certainly at the task stage. And if you do that with a changed dosage here, it's this dosage that is the one that is checked. So if you needed to prorata something, or for any other reason you needed to change the dosage, you can have the suitability check be sensitive to the specific dose. Another thing you might need to do is to generate cross-references. So a cross-reference is a name and a code that you can allocate per item of your own items so that your customers don't see your internal names and your internal codes. So that's quite common. So I'm going to click generate cross-reference, and you can see that both of the real companies, both of the real customers are now going to have these references associated with them. I'm going to pick a particular type of reference. You can actually see this customer's had it before, which is why there's one that's already existing. So I want them to have it again and not necessarily know. So if I do generate cross-references, I've now given them a new one, and I might call this lemony. This one lemon limey, and save them. So those two now are here. And what the effect of this, we can probably see it if we look at some of these reports here. So there's sample delivery note is it's quite a plain report. It can be customized, but if I click sample delivery note, you can see it's this for the customer to go in the box of samples. We've chosen to keep this on here, but we didn't have to do that, but we have. And it's showing them only the codes and names that we want them to see. It's not showing our internal codes and names. But if we do the sample request is an instruction for the laboratory. And the sample request has both the customer facing information as well as the internal information, because the lab need both. So now that would go, if we save it, it then will be ready in Richard's queue. And when those samples are sent, he would obviously go in and make that so. So I'm going to do that, logging in as Richard, just to finish it off. Again, so be search for tasks. And we have that natural lemon squash. So I'm just going to go straight into actions. We've got to use our imagination. The samples have been made, and Richard's super fast. Now he's got to, it's grey, so he has to give a value. He can't just take that away. And if we try to finish it without adding all the information, so like I've done two things, but I haven't said the date sent. If I attempt save, it tells me that I need to put the date in. And as soon as I put a date in, it says, do you want to do that for everything? So handy if you've got a long list. And so now I can save, and so that's the 3 tasks of the project done. So I'm going to log back in as the project manager. If I put that project again, I feel like I should know the number by now. I can look at it, and you can see it's saying action required. It's because all of the tasks of a project have been completed, so it's thinking, you know, I think you might need to do something here. So here we are, and I can see make the status complete. So I could obviously add other tasks and things like that, and there's lots of other stuff I can do, but in this case I shall make it complete. But now there's a couple of other things I need to show you, which is on that task where the development was done, we had the item that was sent. Okay, so this is the new item we created. If I click on that link, obviously I could have opened it directly from the menu. If you scroll down, obviously you can see the kind of information that you'd expect to see normally. There's also other information down here. So one thing is you can see that it's a modification of the formulation that we used as a starting point. So that's handy. You can also see the task that was the reason why the formulation was added. So that's a really good link back to not only the task, but then the project. So if ever you want to know why was this done, when you're using tasks and projects in a good way, you can easily find out without the user having to do anything special. So that's handy. And also, once the samples have been sent, so not just the sample request raised, but the samples saying, yes, they went on this date. If you, on the sample details, if you click sample details, you can see what the customer knows it as, which customer it went to. And again, you can see the task and view the task from there. So you've got this sort of loop of why something was created, who it was for, when it went, and everything else, and where it came from. So it gives you quite a lot of information without having to work hard for it. So from a overview point of view, we've covered everything that I wanted to.